Oh, hello. Wilds of Eldraine is already looking to be one of the most exciting Magic the Gathering sets since Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, but it's not just a great draft environment, and it's not just cool new commander cards that make this set so great. It also brings with it a ton of new toys for Pioneer, as well as a reprint of a modern staple. But that's actually exciting for Pioneer. Wilds of Eldraine has reprinted a card so powerful it once was a staple of the modern format, and that card is now legal in Pioneer. Will this new card set the format aflame? While formats like Legacy, which, by the way, I just played 6 Legacy decks over 3 rounds with Anu Das and Brian Boschenroll Koval, and that video is up and you can watch it here. Back to the video. While formats like Legacy may not be too impacted by new sets like Eldraine, Pioneer is absolutely seeing some changes thanks to both new card designs and reprints such as Sleight of Hand. Let's first talk about why this card is so good for Pioneer, and then cover the new card designs sure to make an impact in Pioneer. So why am I so excited to see this low-cost reprint come to the format? While it may not be the most powerful new card for Pioneer from Wilds of Eldraine, I do feel strongly that out of everything from the set, Sleight of Hand is the most likely to see play in the format. Why? Because we've seen it be good before. Sleight of Hand actually used to be a staple of the modern format. At least it was until Modern Horizons came around. But now it's coming to Pioneer. For those of you who aren't familiar, Sleight of Hand is a sorcery for 1 blue mana that reads, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put 1 in your hand and 1 on the bottom of your library. Sleight of Hand will immediately become the second strongest cantrip in Pioneer after Consider. The card is comparable to Opt, given that scrying a card to the bottom with Opt is roughly equivalent to resolving a Sleight of Hand. The key difference is that Sleight of Hand always shows you both the top card of your library and the card under it, whereas Opt only shows you the card under your top card if you elect not to draw the top card. Why does this matter? Well, let's say that you cast Opt and see that the top card of your library is decent, but not the best possible card you could draw in this moment. Is it worth it to keep it or tuck it to the bottom and draw a mystery card? Do you think the card you're seeing on top is better than the average draw in your deck? If so, you should probably just draw the card. But what if you already knew what the card below it was? Well then, your decision over whether to draw the top card or trade it in for the other card would be much easier to make. Sleight of Hand is better than Opt because it gives you more information to make your decision. Maybe the card on top is decent, but the card below it is much better. Or maybe the card on top isn't great, but the card below it is a land that you definitely don't need. Where Sleight of Hand will shine the most, though, is actually alongside Opt and Consider in the Izzet Arclight Phoenix deck. That deck is capital D desperate for cheap cantrips to chain to return its phoenixes, and fuel the graveyard for its powerful delve spells. If I've done my math correctly, adding Sleight of Hand to Izzet Phoenix increases its cheap cantrip count by a whopping 50%, which is a huge upgrade. Now you don't have to worry about firing off a cantrip turn 1, since you're highly likely to draw more when it comes time to try to return your phoenixes from the yard. The significance that Sleight of Hand will have on the Pioneer format is very real. Not only will it improve Phoenix decks, it'll also become the best cantrip in the format for dedicated combo decks that really want to find specific pieces, yet aren't as concerned about the fuel that cards like Consider provide for delve spells. So while Sleight of Hand isn't exactly going to overpower Pioneer, it will light the format aflame via its auto-inclusion and powering up of Phoenix and combo decks. But that's not all coming to Pioneer from Wilds of Eldraine. Presented here are the top 5 new card designs sure to make an impact and see play in the Pioneer format. And if you're looking to buy singles for your new Pioneer decks, or just dabble into the format by picking up some classic Pioneer Challenger decks to get started, or maybe just buy a booster box for drafting with friends, you can always check out Card Kingdom, sponsor of this channel, by going to www.cardkingdom.com/TCC. If your local game store, which you should always go to first, doesn't have what you're looking for, check out my collection of favorite products, favorite accessories, and I've even curated some great deals on things like old Commander precons. Or just browse through Card Kingdom's vast library of singles and other awesome products. You can also check out Card Kingdom's amazing battle decks, which I did a new review on here. Fully playable decks for only $11.99 each that are great for jamming casual games of Magic with friends and family. Thank you as always to Card Kingdom for their support of this channel over the years. So now that I've covered the Sleight of Hand reprint, what are the top 5 new designs for Pioneer? While Sleight of Hand is indeed a reprint that makes for a powerful new inclusion to the Pioneer format, Wilds of Eldraine has some amazing new card designs that are all likely to impact it in a big way. Let's start that list off with number 5. Behold, Raging Ravine. The quintessential creature land, a staple of Modern for years, back when you were allowed to play a tap land on turn 1. Imagine if we could just have Raging Ravine in Pioneer. Well, imagine no more. With Restless Bivouac, we can. Is it Bivouac? 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 Bivouac. Well, whatever it is a red-white dual land that enters the battlefield tapped. For 1 generic, 1 white, and 1 red mana, this little restless land becomes a 2/2 Ox creature that's still a land. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Now, this card will indeed face many of the same problems in Pioneer that its Gruul predecessor faced in Modern, namely that it gets upstaged by the untapped creature lands from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. But at just 3 mana to activate, Restless B does have the advantage of being far less mana intensive to get going. Entering tapped is certainly a downside though, given that this is the type of land you'd want to play in an aggro deck, and tap lands are unacceptable in today's aggro strategies. But the power level on this card is certainly high, potentially high enough to carve itself out some playing time. It's possible that Restless B finds a home in an aggro deck of some sort, though it will be tough to compete with Den of the Bugbear and other untapped creature lands. What is more likely is that some kind of multicolor mid-range deck that plays some creatures, but doesn't have a ton of early plays will want a couple copies of this card as a win condition built into its mana base. There are some inherent obstacles standing in the way of Restless B's playabilities, but the card is certainly powerful. The question will just be, what Pioneer deck will be brave enough to return us to the age of tapped creature lands? Number 4 on our list is a real rock-solid pick. It's the Irencrag, a 2-mana legendary colorless artifact that taps to add a colorless mana. It also has another line of text. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield, you may have the Irencrag become a legendary equipment artifact named Everflame, Hero's Legacy. If you do, it gains Equip 3, and equipped creature gets +3/+3 and loses all other abilities. That's the Everflame that loses all other abilities, not the creature that the Everflame is equipped to. But forget all that extra text for a minute. There hasn't been a 2-mana mana rock in a standard set since Sphere of the Suns was printed in Mirrodin Besieged. No, Corrupted Graphstone doesn't count. I'm trying to talk about a 2-mana mana rock that actually reliably taps for mana. 2 mana for a mana rock is simply not a rate that Wizards of the Coast has been willing to print into standard anymore, which means they also don't exist in Pioneer. The reason is these sources of 2-mana ramp tend to be very, very good at accelerating slower decks with strong late-game plays into their late game before the faster decks have had a chance to put up an adequate offensive. The Irencrag is worse than any other 2-mana mana rock we've seen, aside of course from Corrupted Graphstone, as it doesn't tap for colored mana, and its late-game utility is a mostly useless equipment with an expensive equip cost. Much worse than a card like Mind Stone, which draws a fresh card when you no longer need the extra mana. The Irencrag is also legendary, so you definitely don't want to draw multiples if you can avoid it. This is a natural nerf to the card since you really want to run 4 copies of your 2-mana ramp so you can run the best chance of drawing it on turn 2, the turn where it's at its best. But you really don't want to run 4 copies because it'll mean you're very likely to draw 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th copy of it, and those would just be dead in hand. These downsides are certainly real and should be noted, but the fact is a 2-mana rock with some deck building constraints is still a 2-mana rock. Mana acceleration that doesn't die to removal is excellent. It's why Wolf Willow Haven and Sylvan Caryatid are so good. Irencrag also doesn't die to board wipes, so it can curve safely into a sweeper like Supreme Verdict on turn 3. The only way to remove this card is to point artifact removal at it, which is generally a poor use for said removal, as the Irencrag isn't really doing anything besides tapping for colorless mana. Irencrag will definitely see play, though just how many copies will go in decks that want it is up for debate. My guess is that 2 will be the most common number, but I could also see just 1 to play alongside a playset of Sylvan Caryatid to have more consistent access to that coveted 2-mana acceleration. Number 3 on the list is an adorable little critter that's giving Monastery Swiftspear a run for her money. It's Elusive Otter, a 1/1 prowess creature for a single blue mana that can't be blocked by creatures with lesser power. The Otter is also an adventure creature. For a green mana and X mana of any color, you may distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. This card is an extremely powerful card for any blitz strategy. Cheap prowess creatures are strong all on their own, but one downside of these cards is they can be chump blocked by small creatures, which means you'll either have to play a weak card like Crash Through to give your big creatures trample, or you'll have to spend a removal spell on your opponent's blocker that could otherwise have just dealt damage directly to your opponent's face. Elusive Otter solves this problem, giving you that cheap prowess body alongside some built-in evasion so your burn spells can stay pointed at your opponent. There have been a few iterations of prowess strategies in Pioneer over the years thanks to the 2 excellent 1-mana prowess creatures legal in the format, Monastery Swiftspear and Soul Scar Mage. But these decks have been lacking in adequately powerful spells to go along with them since the banning of Expressive Iteration. While Elusive Otter doesn't solve that problem, it does provide prowess decks with a crucial third 1-drop, meaning a deck with a full 12 total copies of strong 1-mana prowess creatures will virtually always have one to play on turn 1. All of this has me very confident that not only will prowess decks climb in the ranks in Pioneer, but when they do so, it'll be because of this adorable little otter friend. Want to play with this otter? Play Pioneer! As we climb up the list, number 2 is Up the Beanstalk. A 2-mana green enchantment that draws a card when it enters the battlefield, and anytime you cast a 5+ mana value spell. That's it! That's the card! Usually these types of cheap card drawing payoff cards don't trigger off themselves, so you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get adequate value out of them. Up the Beanstalk is different, since it draws a card immediately when it enters the battlefield. That means you only have to trigger it one additional time in order for this to be a 2-mana draw 2, an excellent rate by Pioneer standards. And if you trigger it 3 times, well, that's just Ancestral Recall. For 1 extra mana, but still pretty decent. I mean, it's not like 2-mana Ancestral Recall wouldn't also be a broken Magic the Gathering card. So where exactly is this going to land in Pioneer? The most appealing home for Up the Beanstalk will be a deck that already played Leyline Binding, as Leyline Binding is a 6-mana spell that almost never actually costs 6 mana. Leyline Binding decks are built to cast the card for 2 or even 1 mana with high consistency, which means you can conceivably draw a second card off Up the Beanstalk as early as turn 3. There are also some spells that don't have their mana costs artificially reduced, but still work great with Up the Beanstalk. Yorion Sky Nomad is a prime example. Oh god, again with Yorion. As Yorion triggers Up the Beanstalk when you cast it, and then flickers the enchantment to draw an additional card at your end step. And you will always have access to Yorion in your command zone, meaning Up the Beanstalk will draw you a second card virtually every game. Up the Beanstalk is also excellent with Bring to Light. As Bring to Light triggers Up the Beanstalk, then if you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, like say the backside of either Valky, God of Lies, or Selfless Glyph Weaver, and yes, that is a legal play, you'll draw a second card immediately. The current best home for Bring to Light in Pioneer is a 5-color Gigantha deck, another companion that triggers Up the Beanstalk again with the companions, oh my god, and plays upwards of 5 or 6 spells greater than 5 mana value that Bring to Light can cast for free, along with a playset of Leyline Bindings. Up the Beanstalk is therefore a natural fit for this deck. Its mana cost doesn't even restrict you from playing Gigantha. Without a doubt, the number 1 strongest card from this set for Pioneer is Questing Druid, a 2-mana 1/1 human druid creature with an ability that gives it a +1/+1 counter every time you cast a white, blue, black, or red spell. Much like the Otter and many other cards from this set, Questing Druid is also an adventure spell. Its adventure mode is Seek the Beast, a 2-mana red instant that reads, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards. Questing Druid is a remarkable card for one specific reason. Both halves of the card are either close to or exactly the same as another magic card that already exists. Seek the Beast is a slightly less powerful variant of Reckless Impulse, Impulse or Ren's Resolve, while the creature half of the card is just Quarion Dryad. Last time we went to Eldraine, the spell side of adventure creatures looked underpowered or overcosted at first glance. 2 mana for a shock, 3 mana to destroy a creature with power 4 or greater, 2 mana to bounce a non-land permanent that you don't control. Nevertheless, these spells indeed proved powerful because they drew you a reasonable creature after they resolved. A 3 mana 4/3 that hurts to target with a spell, a 1 mana 1/2 that can tap a creature down, or a 3 mana 3/1 flying creature with flash. Yeah, these cards were sweet. The spell half of Questing Druid is about as close as an adventure spell can get to a good magic card, even without the creature attached. It's not quite the same as Reckless Impulse. It's an instant, which is nice, but you only get access to the cards you exile until your next end step, unlike Reckless Impulse, which gives you them until the end of your next turn. Therefore, you don't want to tap out for this on your main phase. Unless you have plenty of mana to work with, you probably shouldn't cast this card on your turn at all. But even with that downside, Seek the Beast is actually better than Reckless Impulse, because it doesn't give you 2 cards, it gives you 3. The 2 cards you exile from the top of your library, and a free Quarion Dryad. This card is awesome, and there's a deck in Pioneer already primed to take advantage of it. The Boros Pia deck that's made some waves this past summer with the release of the Aftermath supplemental set. This is a deck that resembles a Prowess deck, but is built to enable the card Pia Nalar, Consul of Revival, a legendary 2 mana 2/3 creature that gives Thopters you control haste and makes a Thopter anytime you play a card from exile. This deck already plays a full 8 copies of the Reckless Impulse variants, legal in Pioneer, to help trigger Pia's ability. It also plays the gold standard adventure creature Bone Crusher Giant, because guess what? Casting an adventure creature from exile while Pia is in play gets you a Thopter token. Can't Thop, won't Thop. This deck is very sweet and quite powerful, and its game plan is a natural fit for Questing Druid. There's just one problem. Boros Pia is a Boros deck, not a Gruul deck. So in order to play Questing Druid, the deck will need to adjust its mana base. But it can't adjust it too much, as one of the primary traits of the deck is that it's a Chained to the Rocks deck, meaning the deck needs both white mana and mountains to target with its Chained to the Rocks. Whether the great minds that construct Pioneer decks can figure out how to reconfigure the mana base to add Questing Druid to the Pia deck remains to be seen. But if it can be done, the sacrifice will surely be worth it, as Questing Druid is not only a very, very powerful card, but overwhelmingly the most powerful new card for Pioneer from Wilds of Eldraine. So that's what I think is coming to Pioneer from Wilds of Eldraine, but now I want to hear from you. Are there any cards you think that I missed that are going to see play in Pioneer? Let me know in the comments below. And if Pioneer is not your jam and you love Legacy formats like Legacy, you can check out my newest episode of Shuffle Up and Play, where I jam 6 Legacy decks over 3 rounds with some awesome Legacy players. And remember, if your local game store doesn't have what you're looking for, you can always check out www.cardkingdom.com/TCC for everything from singles to great deals on things like Commander Precons, all my favorite products and accessories, and battle decks. You can check out my review of battle decks, which I updated right here. Thank you, Card Kingdom, for sponsoring this channel.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
Today, 6 Legacy decks, 3 rounds, 2 players. It's the Legacy Gauntlet.
My name's Anurag. You can call me Anu.
I'm Brian Koval, aka Bosch and Roll.
A scrubland.
I am shocked.
Wow, only white border?
Look, I'm not made out of money.
I apologize, and that was just a joke. I apologize to all 6 people who play Legacy. I'm really sorry. We love it.
Apology accepted. 2 of us are here, right? Yeah.
Thought Monitor's on the stack.
You just played a 7-mana spell with 1 land.
It's true. It's turn 3.
Flash in Orcish Bowmasters, come on.
I guess that tells a lot about my hand.
I have 12 life to work with at the moment.
By my math, that's 6 Ancient Tomb activations.
Okay, the jokes are over.
His face got really serious when he said that too.
There we go.